What's good, kings and queens? Hope everyone's doing well. Alright, I reviewed the best US debuts. It's time now to review the worst US debuts in boxing. With all that being said, let's start the video. Martinez was a rather late bloomer, picking up boxing at the age of 20 in 1995. He would start up his pro boxing career 2 years later in 1997 and rake in 17 fights with a record of 16-0 with 1 draw, before being matched up in his US debut against the far more experienced Antonio Margarito. Margarito having the far better camp leading up to this fight, as he was Oscar De La Hoya's sparring partner. And it seemed like he was for a hot minute, because Margarito can be seen in this De La Hoya commercial as one of his acting sparring partners. Martinez would get dropped in the first round, and the bigger, stronger, and more experienced Margarito would slowly break Martinez down, stopping him in the closing seconds of the 7th round. Jimmy rose up through the European ranks in Denmark to land himself a shot at the EBU title against French contender Pierre Lucy, stopping him in the 11th round. This would set up a fight against WBO super featherweight champion Daniel Landis from France. Jimmy would beat Landis by majority decision to become the WBO champ in his 13th pro bout. A year and a half and a title defense later, Jimmy made the brave voyage over to the US in his debut against a mean 21-year-old Oscar De La Hoya. This was Oscar's first title fight in his career, and he was 11-0 at that time. Oscar would knock him down in the second half of the first round to finish it big. Brendahl did have success in the second round, buckling Oscar, which would go shortly lived, as that very same round Oscar would make him pay, dropping him just moments later. Jimmy would not give up, putting up a valiant effort, but Oscar just way too much for him. After a brutal 10th round resulting in the 3rd knockdown of the fight, despite Jimmy pleading with the doctor that he can finish the fight to make it to a decision, the ringside doctor did not want to take the risk and possibly ruin the young fighter's career, and he advised the referee to stop the fight, resulting in a 10th round TKO win for Oscar. Hassam N'Dam pretty much fought all of his career in France. After some strange events under the WBA, as he was the interim middleweight champion, I just can't find any notes where and why he didn't get a shot at the WBA title, but okay, whatever. N'Dam got the opportunity to fight for the WBO interim title against undefeated Ukrainian Bursak to win wide on the scorecards. Now the events here that take place would also be odd. WBO orders Pirog versus N'Dam, but Pirog goes ahead to set up a fight with Gennady Golovkin. Pirog is stripped of the title, but instead of fighting someone for the vacant WBO title, N'Dam was just given it, and now N'Dam is set to face Peter Quillin on his US and Showtime debut in New York City. This was also the first boxing event held in the newly built Brooklyn Barclays Arena. Both Quillin and N'Dam came in undefeated with the identical record of 27-0. This would be Quillin's best performance up to date, dropping N'Dam not once, not twice, but 6 times. Somehow N'Dam was able to lose by a 12-round unanimous decision, which you could say that's somewhat of a win there, but he didn't come out with that W. Robert Helenius, who was hopeful to one day fight for the title, but had some setbacks, losing to Dupas, which Dupas went on to fight Wilder, and a huge loss against Dylan White. Robert would bounce back and pick up an IBF Intercontinental title, earning number 6 in the IBF rankings in February of 2019. He was set to face former contender Gerald Washington, who was 1-3 in the past year and a half. 3 out of those losses were quite brutal. This would be a rather even fight that would come to a dramatic end. In the 8th round, Washington would get him with a perfect 1-2 which buckled him, and then followed up with a combination that will lay him out. Surprisingly, it did not look all too hard compared to Washington's earlier 1-2 combination. Helenius was unable to make the count, resulting in a KO victory for Washington, putting him back in the mix for a title elimination fight.
He's still hurt. He's going to the body. He's still hurt. Oh! That's it. Oh! Punches. He just punches. He ain't getting up. He ain't getting up. He ain't getting up. Oh! Straight left. Just called it out. Straight punch. He threw the straight right. He did what I told him to do, and he dropped it.
There was quite a bit of buzz behind Eubank Jr. that was finally starting to make some waves across the Atlantic, making news, calling out Gennady Golovkin, Canelo, and most notably training under the tutelage of Roy Jones Jr. It was Eubank Jr.'s time to shine in his US debut against former contender Monte Korobov for the WBA interim title. This was a perfect opponent for Eubank Jr. to show off what he's made of, because Korobov just came off a loss against Charlo in which gave Jamal a lot of trouble. Well, Eubank didn't really get to show off to the Americans what he really could do against Korobov, as the fight came to a sudden end, and the second due to a freak shoulder injury resulting in a Eubank Jr. TKO. Chris did get the win, but this was also a loss as well. Adonis Stevenson fought all of his fights in Canada, moving up the ranks and picking up the WBC regional belt, being ranked number 11 by the WBC. So from the mid-2000s and on to the 2010s, the best fighter, and you can still say the best today, to test your fighter out from 168 to 174 was against Darnell Boone. Darnell is equivalent to Emmanuel Augustus. He is the ultimate journeyman, the ultimate gatekeeper of those two weight classes. To give you a list prior to this fight, Darnell had already faced Andre Ward, which he dropped him, Enrique Helenius, John Pascal, Curtis Stevens, Brian Vera, Craig McGuinn, Arislandi Lara, and Edwin Rodriguez. Please keep in mind, I name all these fights in order, and from Craig McGuinn to Edwin Rodriguez, Boone fought all of them barely 1 month apart from each other. 3 fights in 3 months against blue chip prospects. Holy crap. Boone was literally training himself at the time when he was called on a 2 weeks notice to fight Stevenson. Boone took the fight just because he knew Stevenson didn't have what it took to win. In Boone's own words, he stated, "By him being 13-0, I just figured he couldn't be that experienced, so I took the fight. I didn't know nothing about him," end quote. Now this fight was on Showtime, and no such broadcast footage exists, but very low quality home video did, which was smudged off the internet for many years. Copies of that home video was re-uploaded, but it was in even worse quality. Now, a little over 4 years ago, the home video would resurface, and this time being in far superior quality than what was originally uploaded back in the day. So Boone does what he's good at, which is giving fighters rounds and helping promotions find out if that fighter is ready to move on up. Let's roll the piece of this lost media. Now, in the world of boxing lost media, a particular fight many hardcore boxing fans have been trying to search for is Darnell's fight with Sergey Kovalev. Now, I was told by Evan Holyfield in a comment section of a post, this tape exists, and he saw this tape with his own eyes. Now, that is a fight I would love to see. After Robinson won the middleweight title in 1951, he would have 2 non-title bouts to make an announcement saying he is entitled to a vacation and he will be doing a European tour. So pretty much it was a lot of partying in between 6 fights in less than 2 months. Robinson's fight in Germany ended in a disqualification in the second round for an illegal kidney shot. After the fight, the German Boxing Commission swiftly overruled it to a no contest. After the 6th fight in Italy, the 7th fight was a title fight against the British and EBU champion Randy Turpin from Great Britain. Turpin would shock many, upsetting Robinson to become the middleweight champion. There will be an immediate rematch, and the rematch would take place in New York, making it Randy's first fight in America.
I can't tell you just how much I appreciate this presentation and being back here with you. Well, I just don't know what to say really, but when I do go to America, I can assure you that I shall be 100% fit when I go in the ring, and I'm confident myself that I should return to England still the middleweight championship of the world.
Well, so far so good from Randy, in which he had cut Ray and was up on the scorecards. The ref was threatening to stop the fight due to his cut. Ray told the ref to give him one more round, in which he did. Ray would stop Randy that very same round to reclaim the middleweight championship. Before we get back to the video, YouTube stay tripping with this algorithm thing. If it ain't getting a certain amount of likes and comments, they ain't pushing it to the rest of the good old subscribers. And unfortunately, folks don't see till days, sometimes weeks later. 1 like helps the good folks out there. This week's comment section discussion topic is, what was your first introductory to boxing? Your first welcome to boxing moment? My moment didn't take place really till years later when I started working fights. It was the second fight I ever shot ringside at. It was during Canelo Smith. Yep, that's me right there in the Harambe t-shirt. I actually dedicated that shoot to Harambe. Not joking. True story. Anyways, this moment happened during the Jojo Diaz against the Andrew Cancio fight. Diaz had split Cancio's nose wide open, and it was the worst I've ever seen in person. Jojo had landed this beautiful shot in Cancio, and my gosh, the largest globs of blood and cartilage flew right at me, got on my lens, on my camera, and the biggest glob out of them all flew right in my eye, blinding my left eye. All the OG photographers at ringside fell out laughing because they knew I was a new guy, and Hogan, a very great, well-respected boxing photographer, let off a chuckle and said, "Welcome to boxing, kid." Well, that was my moment. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and let's get back to the video. In mid-2015, I did a video about boxers to keep an eye out on, pretty much a list of what Westerners would find very obscure. Jeff Horn was on that list of fighters. After numerous regional belt fights, Horn landed himself a mega fight against Manny Pacquiao for the WBO title, which crazy enough he had the rare privilege of fighting Manny in his backyard of Australia. Bob Sheridan from the international broadcast scored at 114-113 for Manny Pacquiao. CBS Sports had it a draw. I like Manny, I was rooting for him that fight, but when I was watching it live that night, I thought it was incredibly close and he needed to do something big to get that extra insurance of a decision, which he did. I had him by a smidge, but again, it all depends what the judges are looking for. I give it that on a personal note. The 117-111 card was pretty and public enemy #1 across the Pacific. Just a year later, Horn was set up to fight former undisputed junior welterweight champion Terrence Crawford. Crawford, who was a big junior welterweight and also a big welterweight, There was an immense amount of hype around Anthony Joshua, which was well deserved, beating Dylan White, Charles Martin for the belt, Klitschko, Parker, and Povetkin, collecting the WBA, WBO, IBF, and IBO titles. Now, I've mentioned this quite a bit in the past with Joshua's sudden direction after the Klitschko fight, where he was looking far more muscular. On top of that, he wasn't using his God-given range. The Povetkin fight foreshadowed what's to come in the next fight, which was against Big Baby Miller, but due to a failed drug test, Andy Ruiz was a last-minute replacement. Keep in mind, Ruiz was in camp for a call-up. He was in great shape. This isn't a Darnell Boone situation here. It's more of a Pacquiao-led Waba. Pacquiao was already in camp. He had just signed a one-year deal with Murat Muhammad. Muhammad was able to get Pacquiao a title fight 4 days after signing to him to fight Ledwaba on a 2 weeks notice.
4 days later, Lamomo from South Africa, his opponent fell out. I knew then time to move Manny Pacquiao in. So when I called the IBF, they said, "Wait a minute, you're only number 7 in the world." I said, "Yes, but if you check number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6, they're not available. So we are the lead available contender." You're right. And that's how we got the shot. So Rodney's there and said, "My God, you do pull miracles. 4 days after signing, we're fighting for a world title."
With the hype surrounding you and you're making your US debut, it's a mandatory to deliver big or it'll shatter whatever the public thinks of you in the States. Like the NFL channel, Flemo Raps would say, the man had won a genetic lottery. When it comes to size, when it comes to range, this man won the genetic lottery, and for some reason, this guy does not use any of that and wants to fight perfectly within the range of Ruiz, who for heavyweight standards has T-Rex arms. Joshua with his long arms all in Ruiz's range. Unless Ruiz has Alfredo Angulo hand speed, 10 times out of 10 his shot is going to connect before Joshua's, which once Ruiz did get into that position, the fight was a wrap and Ruiz would stop Joshua in the 7th round to become the champion and make history. This loss really stuck with Joshua, and from the American perspective, it raised high doubt that he was even able to win the rematch. I was talking to a representative of Ring Magazine backstage on the Canelo Caldwell fight week, and his response was he didn't see Joshua winning, and he's finished. Despite my talking points in regards of Joshua not using his range, and him getting more lean and shredding off that unnecessary muscle for the rematch. In the rematch, he used his range, and due to all the unnecessary muscle he shredded, started off, he was a lot more flexible. He didn't seem so tensed up and stiff. Joshua's speed and agility was a bit heightened by comparison due to Andy Ruiz coming in 15 pounds heavier in the rematch. He was 268 in the first fight and 283 in the rematch, his career high being 297 and 292. Joshua will win the rematch by a wide margin, but despite Joshua showing another layer to his game, the damage was already done to the public opinion from Americans. The only thing I see to fixing this is if Joshua makes a return back to America to face Deontay Wilder, a third fight with Ruiz, or maybe Jared Anderson if he gets in the ranks. And on top of that, this is the worst US debuts in boxing. For another installment, be sure to like, share, and if you're new, subscribe. Subscribe to the Patreon for Patreon-backed projects and early access. I'm Alpha Sancho, and I'm out.